It's all yours.
All right, we're going to get started. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Conscious Contact Speaker Group of Alcoholics Anonymous. My name is Bill. I'm an alcoholic. This is a one-hour speaker meeting that meets every Saturday evening at St. Paul's Lutheran Church at 301 North Main Street at 8:30 p.m. in Doylestown, PA. The purpose of this group is to provide a consistent message of hope and recovery through God reliance and service to others through the practice and teaching of the 12 steps. We record all speakers so that others may benefit from their message of recovery. If you wish not to be recorded, simply ask. This is an open meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. The group would like to welcome everyone, especially newcomers. Is there anyone new or from out of town that would like to introduce themselves by their first name? Yeah. Hey, welcome. Hey, Ashley, welcome. Hey, Suzanne, welcome. Hey, Jen, welcome.
I'm Heather, and I'm an alcoholic.
Welcome, Heather.
I'm Al, an alcoholic.
Al, welcome.
I'm Teresa, I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Teresa, welcome.
Chris, I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Chris, welcome.
Michelle, an alcoholic.
Hey, Michelle, welcome. Anybody else? All right, welcome to everybody. We're happy to have you here with us. The Conscious Contact Speaker Group encourages sponsorship. Would anyone with working knowledge of the 12 steps and is willing to sponsor, please raise your hands. Are there any announcements for the good of AA?
I'm Joe, alcoholic.
Hey, Joe.
The 11th-step group of Allentown, Pennsylvania is having a campout called the Carrywater Childhood Campout. It's at Pinnacle Park. It's next weekend, the 11th, 12th, and 13th. It's $4 a night per person. That's what the county charges. There are flyers in the back, or see me at the meeting. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. All right, we do have meeting lists and big books available on easy terms. Please see me or any home group member after the meeting if you need one. If you cannot afford a big book, the Conscious Contact Speaker Group will give you one at no charge. Anyone willing to make donations for the purchase of big books and CDs to help those who can't afford them can put donations in the jar on the back table marked Big Book and CD Donations. If you'd like a CD of any speaker, past or present, please see me or Ron before or after the meeting. They are available free of charge. And I've asked Dan to come up and read the AA preamble.
I'm Dan, and I'm an alcoholic. A preamble. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other, that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution. Does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and to help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. And I've asked Luli to come up and read the 12 steps.
Hi, I'm Luli. I'm an alcoholic. So these are the 12 steps of recovery. Step 1, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. In step 2, we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Next, we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. In step 4, we made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. Step 5, we admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. Step 6, we were entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. In 7, we humbly asked Him to remove our shortcomings. Step 8, we made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. In 9, we went and made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. Step 10, we continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. In 11, we sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. And finally, in step 12, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs.
We have a 7th tradition. Every AA group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. At this time, I'd like to pass the basket. We have no dues or fees, but we do have expenses: coffee, cream, donuts, rent, big books, and CDs. One announcement: there is absolutely no smoking on church property. And if you could, please silence all cell phones and limit movement during the meeting to avoid distractions. Now it's time for the speaker. Please help me welcome Scott S. from the Franklintown Sunday Morning Group of Philadelphia.
Thank you. First things first, take a drink. I'm a little taller, Ron. We got to get that up there. My name's Scott, and I'm an alcoholic. I'm very grateful to be alive and sober, recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. I want to thank Ron for this kind invitation to be here tonight. I usually say a little prayer before I get up to share with you. What better prayer than God help me? Please, God, help me. That's a wonderful prayer. It reminds me of something my sponsor said to me a long time ago. He said, Scott, help me, I've fallen into the hands of a living God. And what I took from that was, and applying it to my own experience, God turns out to be much more real than I ever wanted him to be. That God will take me and do things with my life that I didn't expect. I mean, perfect example, how many of us really came here to have a spiritual experience? I certainly didn't. And what is the importance of that? Step 12, just the language of it, having had a spiritual experience as the result. Not like one of many, but the result of these steps. Well, in my book, it says to me, after getting clear, or attempting to get me clear on what it is that I suffer from in regards to alcohol, that if I can't control the amount I take, and if I can't control the stopping and starting of my drinking, and once I start I can't control my drinking, then I'm probably alcoholic. And if that be the case, I'm maybe suffering from an illness which only a spiritual experience will conquer. So that's all I got for you. That's all we have here. I encourage you to go to meetings. You can do 90 and 90. You can do 180 and 90. But I would suggest to seek out a spiritual experience as the result of these steps. Now, I come to you as a student of the Big Book. I'm not a teacher. I'm not interested in teachers in Alcoholics Anonymous. Although my sponsor taught me how to be a student, it was his capacity as a student that enabled him to do that and be that, if you get where I'm going with this. Because my thinking mind is not my friend. And if I assume the position of teacher here in Alcoholics Anonymous, now it's about you. Let me teach you. It's not me. It's not about me working the program of Alcoholics Anonymous in my own life as much as it's me teaching you and who you're helping, right? And if you offend me, it's because you're spiritually sick. And then I'll go to the Big Book and I'll pervert that line that says they, like us, were perhaps like spiritually sick as well. And now I'm looking at your faults instead of disregarding your faults and looking at my own. And then we go on the attack here in Alcoholics Anonymous, and we become the Big Book person at our home group. And now I know how everybody's supposed to be acting and sounding. And having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, I pick up my spiritual bat and I beat you over the head with it. I know what that's like. I was so desperate for God. I didn't know that. I thought I was desperate for her. I thought I was desperate for some new clothes. I thought I was desperate for a great apartment. I was desperate for money in my pocket and get my status back in the neighborhood, get my respect back. Because of the pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization that I experienced before I got sober. I needed to shed that by getting people to see me the way they used to see me. I get all this stuff, and I'm 3.5 years separated from alcohol, not thinking about a drink, and I'm going to blow my brains out. Because I thought all that stuff was going to fix me. I thought she was going to save me. I became a worshiper of the material world. Now, I'm not a worshiper of these steps or the big book either. I'm a worshiper of God. The program of Alcoholics Anonymous, the 12 steps, are a vehicle to the power. They're a vehicle to the power that I so desperately need when I walk in here. But like I said, who came here for a spiritual experience? Give me a job, a pocket full of money, and a girlfriend, and I'll work the rest of that stuff out. I'll be okay. If I can just not drink, And I can tell you, just don't drink. But good luck. I bounced in and out of Alcoholics Anonymous for many years, from the age of 17 to 35, just trying not to drink, because I didn't know what it meant to be an alcoholic. I would put my hand up and say, I'm Scott, I'm an alcoholic. I didn't know what it meant, because to be an alcoholic and know it, I know I can't just not drink. I'm going to drink. I thought step one meant, okay, I know. How's your first step? Well, I got my first step nailed down. I can't drink no matter what. And that sounds like a great thing, and you get some attaboys at your home group and all that. You go around and talk about, I just can't. I choose not to drink under any and all conditions. You'll hear that one too. I can't choose not to drink. I lost the power of choice in regard to alcohol many, many years ago. And step one is not that I can't drink, it's that I will drink. That's my first step experience. I will drink. I will drink no matter what. I will go from a position of sobriety, and suddenly the thought will cross my mind. And however it manifests itself, it will take me to a drink. That's the thinking mind. My best friend, who I listen to all the time, who we were listening to on the way here, in its many voices, right? Chatter of 1,000 voices. I thought I was a loner, right? I thought I would prowl the streets by myself, but even in sobriety, I brought my thinking mind with me. I was never alone. It was always telling me something. It'll tell me how to act. It'll tell me how spiritual I am. As I bash you, and my mind will get really good at justifying those behaviors. You'll see it. Take a look at the tradition police that are zipping through Alcoholics Anonymous these days. Standing at a podium just like this and shooting darts at another member of Alcoholics Anonymous because maybe they work in the treatment business or something. The mind can twist any component or aspect of our program and use it against me. Like when we get sober, the girls want to look cute and the guys want to look handsome and charming and all. And we can do that stuff in our minds. The thinking mind, where my alcoholism lives and thrives, will turn that stuff against us. And then we find out you're not so cute, and I'm certainly not that charming, am I? It's fun. I get to see my friend Kim tonight. I'm really glad. I just shared something with her. I said that God turns out to be a lot more real than I ever wanted him to be. Spirituality turns out to be something very different from what we think it is when we walk in these rooms. The mind creates the physical fantasy of what the spiritual life is going to look like and feel like. And if you wonder what that might be, take a look on Facebook. And you'll see Facebook spirituality in full force. There'll be unicorns and rainbows, and there'll be a nice, flawless, pristine coastline with waves lapping in, maybe a little dolphin, and a little post saying oh, my meditation this morning, I felt God, and I know it was God, and I feel God flowing through me and out to others, and all that nonsense, And then we sit alone, full of fear, full of self-centered fear in its many forms. We leave the house and we're not 5 minutes down I-95. We got resentment going on. We get to our jobs and we're afraid of what people on the job will do. Or if I'm an employer, I'm afraid that my guys aren't going to make me enough dough. I'm afraid I underbid that job. I'm afraid that client's not going to, you know what I'm saying? We're whistling in the dark in here. And I can tell you, spirituality can be pretty messy. It's not the pleasure cruise that I thought it was going to be. That physical fantasy that I created about God. Having chosen God, I expect the rewards based on the material world and how I deal with you. And how you've dealt with me. I do a good job at work, I get paid, I get compensated. The spiritual world does not always work that way. It's not hand to mouth. There's delayed reaction in a lot of it. I expect God to show up the way Ron does. We're sitting down to eat dinner. I say, hey, Ron, would you pass the pepper? Bang. He passed the pepper. Ron, pass the mashed potatoes. Boom. Okay, Scott, pass the roast beef. And we do that back and forth. God doesn't work that way. Beauty is skin deep, but ugly is all the way to the bone. And I had to get in touch with my shadow side. Nobody ever talked about that. I'd never heard about that. I had to find out about that. And then once I started to find out about that, my sponsor knew exactly what was going on with me because he's there himself. And if we don't have sponsors that are willing to go to those places with us that we're not willing to go, we're not going. I'm not going. You got to take me there. Just like when I first met my sponsor, he had to come into the cave to get me. I was in the dark. He knew his way around the cave because he'd been there. And he's willing to take me to those places I don't want to go. I spent the past year and a half or so in the dark night. John of the Cross called it the dark night of the soul. And it's that thing, you don't know you're there till you're out. I look back and say, wow, man, I've been eating my lunch. You know, something really terrible had happened. My brother, who was like my only, besides my son, he was my only like living immediate relative left. And we had been through a great deal. He died. You know, he died on the couch, man, and this illness, this disease took him. And it leveled me. And I didn't realize how much until I just went through the steps a couple of months ago, because things had been, I was having ugly moments in my life, and I didn't understand where they were coming from. I'm like, what is going on with me? You know, it's like you end up with jam on your face and you wonder how that just happened. You know, I have a meditation life, I have a prayer life, I do inventory, I have a nightly review, I sponsor a dozen guys, I carry the message when I'm invited to do so. I am of service. I bring God into my work life. And here I am with jam on my face. What just happened? I can't understand what just happened. All right, well, maybe it's time to go through the work and get clear on some stuff. So I did, and it's nothing to be embarrassed about. I guess what I'm trying to say is, let's stop trying to decide what spirituality is going to look like and what it's supposed to look like. And I have to be, you know, act your way into right thinking. Well, I'm still an actor. How about I heal my way into right being? I like the sound of that much better. Now that doesn't always feel good. But what I wanted to get drunk on spirituality is what I really wanted. I thought I would meditate my way into some blissful state. And it's just not that way. Now how am I supposed to, how likely is it that we're going to actually put spirituality in these parentheses and have it be accurate? Right? Having had no experience with a spiritual awakening. But that's what the thinking mind does. The thinking mind was ruling my life from my earliest memories. I mean, I grew up in Philadelphia, and you know, I would hear about all this brotherly love stuff in school, and like, it wasn't my experience. You know, in history class, the city of brotherly love thing, I'm like, what are you talking about? It looked scary to me. You know, everybody looked like they were, you know, the only guys who seemed to be okay out in the street were tough guys. And I figured, okay, I got to be tough. Well, now I got to go get with them. And I did. I sought out that, you know, if I wasn't going to be the toughest guy in the neighborhood, which I wasn't, I would hang out with those who were. I would seek them out. And I wanted what they had, and I was willing to go to any lengths to get it. And that means acting a certain way. It means doing certain things. And I was more than willing to do that stuff. And my father couldn't stand it. He could see it in me. And he had grown up. His father was a street guy. And my father vowed that he was going to be legit. And he was. He was a legitimate guy. And he got us out of the neighborhood where we grew up in Brewerytown to get away from all that. And what happened was, it seems like the whole neighborhood had also moved out, and we all ended up in another neighborhood. So you really didn't get away from it. It was like everybody in the neighborhood was from like Brewerytown down 26th and Girard, or like 30th and Master, or 29th and Poplar, or there was another gang of them from like 22nd, 23rd, and Allegheny and Cambria and all that, and we all ended up in Roxborough. It was like just being in the neighborhood again. And I'd moved all over the city, you know. I moved from Roxborough, I moved back down to Fairmount and Brewerytown area with my relatives, and the Manayunk, and all over the place I lived. And wherever I went, I would seek out those who seemed to be running things in the neighborhood. You know, I had an uncanny ability to do that. I mean, I remember being in high school, you know, I could go down to Abbotsford Projects, or Germantown Projects, or East Falls Projects, or I could go down, you know, the guys I knew in South Philadelphia. I knew who was who down there. I knew who was who down in Fairmount. I knew wherever I went, I knew what I thought was the right people. Here they turn out to be all the wrong people, but because I was able to flow all over the city like that, seamlessly, you know. And alcohol was a big part of what I did. I just drank. By the time I was a teenager, I drank daily. And the first time I had taken a drink, I didn't know what a spiritual malady was. And I had heard a friend of mine talking about it, but before I asked a man to sponsor me, I had heard on a CD this man talking about the spiritual malady, doing a workshop, and I was like, wow, I mean, bells and lights were going off, you know, like I was having a first step experience. But I didn't know what that was when I was 3 years old and 6 years old, and I had that thing going on inside of me, where I just knew I wasn't going to be right. I just knew I wasn't okay. I never felt safe. My brother, God rest him, used to torture me when I was a child. I guess he was jealous because when I came around, and I mean, he would pin me down and immobilize me, and then he would cover my mouth and my nose until I would start passing out. And then he'd let me catch my breath, and then he would do it again, and he would let me catch and he would do that to me for God. I don't know how. I was terrified as a kid. And I had these neighbors across the street, the Pasalacquas, and they were different. They were just different kind of people. They always had a nice Cadillac in the driveway. Big Jim always had a nice suit on. And the nephew was my best friend, and they had plenty of dough. And I mean, they would play cards and stuff, and we would get them drinks, me and Billy, the nephew, and they would slip you like a sawbuck, you know, like $5, man. In 1974, that was a lot of money. That was a lot of money back then, and that's what we would do. And I was like, man, I wanted what they had, and I was willing to go to any lengths to get it. And I remember my dad telling me he didn't want me over there, and you know, I understand Billy's your friend and all, and I'd be like, but Dad, you should see Big Jimmy. He's got a knot on him that's the size of that, you know, and he like like corn on the cob, you know. And he would grab me and shake me, say, that's all the money that man has. And I'm like, no way, man. I just wanted to believe he was right, you know. My dad knew the deal. He grew up around all that stuff. But my father hated that street life, and I loved it. And I was in love with the street life my whole life. And even sometimes now, when I find myself getting backed up against the wall, my mind goes right back to, oh, I know how to take care of this. You know what I mean? I can puff up and do all that stuff, and it's not going to work. And I don't do those sorts of things today. I can tell you today, I live the greatest days of my life right now. Right here, right now, I'm living the greatest days of my life. I'm a legitimate businessman. I own a small business. I'm doing a lot of things I never believed I would do. I don't know many alcoholics who think very much of themselves when they show up here, and I was no exception. But I'll tell you what, that thing that was going on with me, that dis-ease and discomfort when I was about 12 years old, because we were like robbing trucks, stealing freight off trucks and stuff, and my little girlfriend, her dad, had these pawn shops down in Atlantic City. We would fence the, you know, cigarettes and candy and all kinds of stuff, whatever was on the truck. At the supermarkets, we would rob him, and he would sell that stuff out of these shops he had in Atlantic City. That stuff didn't sit right with me because I had been brought up and taught, verbally taught, instructed on what was right and what was wrong. And that sort of stuff didn't really sit well with me. I'm sure of it. Maybe I'm sure it contributed to the dis-ease and discomfort I had, along with just being afraid of everything all my life. When I took that first drink, that was erased immediately. It washed over me, and I remember it. It was such a warm feeling. I was in love. I knew that alcohol worked. I knew that alcohol treated my disease. That sounds like an insane thing to say, but in essence, it really did. I was suffering from untreated alcoholism before I ever took a drink, and alcohol treated that. It calmed the voices. It calmed the dis-ease and discomfort. And alcohol worked for a very long time, until it didn't work anymore. I experienced blackouts. I got into a tremendous amount of trouble. I was having trouble in school anyway. I remember the nuns would beat me from one end of this room to the other. I'd go to school with my hair parted on the right. I'd come home and it'd be parted on the left. And I suffered some serious abuses in grade school at the hands of priests and nuns and some other fine individuals. But I get to heal from that stuff today. But I'll tell you what, I've operated out of my wounds all my life. Character defect is how I do business. And if I don't get in touch with that stuff, it's going to drive me forever. So I can't emphasize the importance of healing here in Alcoholics Anonymous, and good sponsorship in Alcoholics Anonymous, and most importantly, a loving God in Alcoholics Anonymous. Because it's God and nothing less than that great fact that's going to make me okay today. That's going to allow me to go from here out into the world and actually function. It's amazing I was able to walk the streets and operate out there. It's how insane I became. It was all about making money for me as a kid. The first time I ever experienced any kind of rehab, treatment, AA, any of that stuff, is I got arrested, when I was about 16 or 17 years old. A lot of us were getting arrested for the things we were doing out in the street. It wasn't the daily drinking that got me in trouble. It was some other things and the ways I was making money. Like when I went to school, I went in the front door, I did my thing, and I walked out the back door. I went and got ready for the next day in school. It was a grind. I was on a grind to make money when I was, before I was an adult. And I was making more money than a lot of the adults on my block, I'm sure. I remember I never had my parents buy me clothes. And my mom and dad would say, you spend money like you make, all this money and stuff. Where are you getting your money? My dad knew where I was getting my money. He knew it wasn't from my little dishwashing gig down at the Valley Green Inn in Fairmount Park, But that's just how it was for me. And I ended up getting arrested for that. And some other of my friends did too. And I go away, and they're like, well, I go into Youth Study Center, and this Youth Study Center was a really crazy place. They knocked it down finally. But I don't know why they called it the Youth Study Center. They didn't study you or anything, like a lab rat. They locked everybody up, and everybody was in the same spot. Rapos, murderers, whatever, juvenile delinquents, everybody got locked up with everybody else. And it was nuts in there. They came to me and said, hey, if you say you got a problem, we'll let you out and put you in this program. And I'm like, well, what's this program? Oh, it's typically 28 days. I'm like, oh, great, yeah, I'll take that. And they ended up keeping me till my 18th birthday. So I was there for a year. And I was a ward of the state until I was 18. I remember being in this place, and it was called Today Incorporated. I think it's still around. But they did some weird things. They'd make you wear signs and stuff. And I remember my thing was I love to talk back. If you were going to say something to me, I'm not having it. I'll tell you where to go. I didn't care who you were. If you were Joe, the head counselor, I would tell you what was up when, I was just an idiot. Just the way it was. I remember I had anger issues, of course, and they would send me down to this spider-infested shack that had a heavy bag in there, and he'd make me hit the heavy bag, but he wouldn't let me wrap up. I'd be hitting the heavy bag till my knuckles would bleed. It was just a weird place. Anyway, on my 18th birthday, I called my PO and she let me leave. And I'm like, oh, thank God. And I'm really, like everybody, I had built up this wonderful structure that I was about to tear down. I didn't know that. I remember my mother came to pick me up from there and she was so elated because she had thought she was going to see this tremendous change in me. You know, I wasn't getting loaded anymore. It looked like my attitude had changed a little bit. When I got out, I went right back out onto the streets, but I was still going to meetings. And I was going to give this sobriety thing a shot. And then a friend of mine that I had worked for, he was a little older, he was about 20. He had gotten arrested and he was going to go to state penitentiary. And he decided he wasn't going to be able to do that. And he jumped off a bridge and he killed himself. And I was crushed. You know, I mean, it's not that I hadn't experienced loss in my life. I had experienced a lot of loss up to that point. I mean, guys were getting shot, and guys were getting killed and hurt all over the place back in the 80s and all when I was out there in the street. But like, this guy was like my best friend, you know what I mean? And it was like, man, and he took his own life. I just thought, like, that's so ridiculous to me. I remember the luncheon after the funeral. Now I'm sober now, right? Going to meetings every day. I'm still hanging out on the street with some of the guys, but I'm going to stay sober. I chose not to drink under any and all circumstances. And I go to this luncheon, and the waitress comes around and says, you know, what do you have? And I turn, and just like that, I said, a bottle of Bud. And it's like, everybody looked at me like, what? And it's not because I was a kid. I was still a teenager. That was okay. It's the fact that they knew where I just came from. I just got released. They knew what I was like. I mean, I was like an adult. I thought I was. I did the things that the adults did. I hung out in places like the adults did as a teenager. You know what I mean? Out on the street, the adult guys would give me adult jobs to do, and I was trusted like that. But my maturity level, certainly not adult. I don't even know if I'm there yet. There is a certain level of immaturity that comes with being an alcoholic. Trust me. Just take a look at our ideas about God. We'd get real clear on that. Not that I have anything figured out, believe me. But they knew where I was going to end up. And I'm thinking, I'm all right. Like, what are y'all looking at? You know, go look at him. I'll be okay. You know, and that's how my life was. I was either trying to get sober, staying sober for short amounts of time, or getting loaded and relapsing and trying to get sober again and getting loaded and relapsing, trying to get sober again. And then I get sober and then I'm okay. And then I get a year, I get 6 months, I get 9 months, I go back out. Never ever once asking somebody to take me through this work. Sitting in meetings, maybe just like this one, and you got that thing going on. I know there's somebody sitting here that alcoholism is on you. I mean on you, like ugly on a gorilla. And you're sitting here and you're thinking, man, I'm gonna be able to shake this. I'm gonna be okay. And I'm telling you, man, you're not. No way. I need God more now today than I ever did in my life. I have the ability today to blow my life up absolutely and completely. So I need to surrender my life to God absolutely and completely. You know, God does not make too hard terms for those who seek. And I accepted those terms. I made that deal with God. I will give you my life for my life. And I welch on that deal all the time. I do. I fall short. But God is very kind. God never judges me the way I judge me, or the way you may judge me, or the way we may judge each other. It's actually just quite ridiculous that we go through the work a time or two and have a little sobriety under our belt, and now we're going to judge everybody else in Alcoholics Anonymous. It happens all the time. It's happening right now. Believe me, somewhere in somebody's home group, in somebody's life. You know, it's just the way it seems to be. And I guess it's the way it's supposed to be. If it wasn't, it wouldn't be. Why did God save me? for his reasons, not mine. For his reasons, not yours. Some guy that's great to his wonderful to his family, loving, caring man, never drank, never did drugs, provides for his family. On his way to work one day, steps off the curb, gets hit by a bus. And gone. Why is that? I don't know. Guy like me, hurt people all his life, was a taker, drinking, managing my alcoholism with other drugs so I could continue drinking. You know what I mean? Armed robber, all that stuff, fugitive of justice, you name it, I did it. And I get to live the greatest days of my life. So forget about trying to make sense of it all. It just is. So that sort of stuff was happening in my life all the time. I was either trying to get sober, stay sober, or sitting there wondering how I just relapsed. In 1996 or 7, I think it was 96, I got sober, I thought, for the last time. And I had that woman on my arm, you know, that girl that's going to save me, because a relationship's going to save us. You know that, right? I'll be okay if only I can get the relationship. And then I get the relationship, I'm like, nah, this ain't it. I'm the guy who wants more out of life than there is. I'm here, then I want to go over there. I got a bottle of water, I want some iced tea. I got medium roast, I want dark roast. I want this car, I want a truck now. I got a Cadillac, now I want a Camaro. I was just at this conference, Fellowship of the Spirit, out in the Rocky Mountains, and my lovely girlfriend and I go to the rental car place, and they hand me the keys to this SS Camaro. Because I'm like, well, I don't want a 4-cylinder because you're going up in the mountains and stuff. You need some power. They're like, well, you can have, what was it, like the Impala, or we have this SS Camaro over here. It has like 7,000 miles on it. I'm like, oh, I'll take that. And I get behind the wheel, and it's like I'm in a spaceship, man. It's like, boom. Now I'm thinking, man, when I get back home, I'm selling my Cadillac. Unbelievable. You know what I'm saying? I think I'll stick with the Cadillac. But anyway, that summed up my life. In and out of treatment, in and out of meetings, you know. I'm with this girl, I swear I love her, but every other night of the week there's somebody else. I'm sober now. I'm about 2 years sober. And I got that thing on me, and I can't stand myself. I go back to work for some of the old-timers in the neighborhood, not the AA old-timers either. And, you know, I'm like going back to the gym so I can be a better thug. And I'm shooting steroids, and I'm hitting the gym. I mean, I'm in sobriety, right? Supposed to be living an honest life. I'm flying to Mexico and smuggling steroids back in the United States with my brother. And my brother was also sober at the time. Bless you. And I go to this backyard barbecue. I got the girl with me, this girl I was with from New York, who I loved, right? Please don't love me. So I'm with her, and I'm sitting there, and I get a burger, you know, that killer burger, like a Shaggy burger, man, from Scooby-Doo. And I look over at that keg, and I'm thinking, suddenly the thought enters my mind, a beer will go great with my burger, and I reach and pick it up. I mean, it was just like after that funeral at the luncheon. Some trivial excuse for drinking. And I did not show up thinking about a drink. I really, as far as I was concerned, was in a place of neutrality. I hadn't thought about drinking. And I reached for that beer, and up to my lips it went. And again, everybody there, I mean, they were all guys and gals from the neighborhood, but they knew me. They knew where I was headed. They cared about me. They didn't want to see me pick up that drink. And I'm like, what? If it gets that bad, I'll go back to AA. You know what I mean? They knew where I was headed once again, and I thought I was going to be okay. My brother had nicknamed me the Berserker. That was his nickname for me when I drank. And because that's how I was. I was like just out of control. I was unstoppable. And I picked up that drink, and in a very short time, my brother had also picked up a drink. And the two of us, in a very short time, were robbing street corners all over North Philadelphia. You know, anybody that was out there making money on the street illegally in North Philly, we were robbing them. And that's just how it was. and we would rob them every single night of the week. And my friend Mikey got shot in the face and killed one night. But that didn't stop us. I couldn't stop. I was just unable to stop. You know, if it gets that bad, I'll go back to AA. Well, how bad's it got to get? I had somebody ask me that. You know, this girl would come, a woman, I knew her all my life. I used to work for her father. He was one of them neighborhood guys. And she would come and say, Scott, you're dying. When are you going to stop? And I would say, I don't know when I'm going to stop. But I got some stuff, you know, some booze and some other stuff in the apartment. You got to go. And I go back in the apartment with the cave. You know, the wonderful apartment my brother and I thought was so cool. And I thought it was great. You know, when you get sober, you gotta start dressing up nice. You got to get a nicer car. And then you got to get the job. And you got to get some money in your pocket. You got to get a great apartment. We had this great apartment. It overlooked the pool, the gym, the tennis courts, and the balcony there. Fairmount Park in the background. It was great. You know, and we stopped paying for that apartment. You know, and we stopped paying for the electric. And, you know, my brother and I, that Wild West life, you know, started to wear us out. And we would steal food from the supermarket. And he would grab jelly off a shelf, and on a label it says, place in refrigerator after opening. And he would point to that label and go, place on balcony after opening. And shove it into his coat, because that was our new refrigerator, the balcony. We didn't have a refrigerator anymore, so we kept our food out on the balcony to keep it from spoiling as summer turned to winter. You know? And finally the sheriff came, put us out of there. I remember walking, I knew who it was when the doorbell rang. I just got up, I already had my bag packed, my bag of trash. And I got up and I walked past him with my little bag of trash. And he's like, hey, sign this. I'm like, yeah, okay. And I split. I get in the elevator. I go down to my car, and I leave. And I hold up in a hotel with whatever money I had that we had robbed the night before. And then I call her, like any tough guy does, call her. Who? The one that was always trying to save me. And she came right away and got me. Moved me right in. Because she thought she was going to sit. Thank God for Al-Anon today. I have a great respect for Al-Anon, man. That fellowship should be 5 times bigger than Alcoholics Anonymous, based on statistics. It should. I just came from a big book conference in Colorado, Fellowship of the Spirit, where Al-Anon is involved in the conference as much as the AAs. In all the workshops, you'll have AA and Al-Anon speakers on every step, and they work out of the big book out there. It's great to see. Because I tour through people's lives. All my life, I was a taker. And she thought that she was going to make me okay. Just with her own self. She'd get me a case of beer, you know, because I love planting tomatoes and stuff. Peppers and all that. So she'll put me in the back there. I'll plant some tomatoes in the backyard, and she can keep me happy, get me a case of beer, and everything's going to be great. Well, halfway through that case of beer, man, I got to go. I'm like, I'll be right back. I'll go I need a pack of smokes or something. Anything, I'm going to be right back. And I would leave. And when the money in my pocket ran out, I would jump the counter somewhere with a bat and rob somebody, strong arm robbery, or I would get a hold of a piece and I'd go do some stick-ups, and I'd run like that for like a week. And then when I ran out of gas emotionally and mentally, I would come back to the house with my tail between my legs, promising not to do it again. And after a short period of time, I'd go do it again. Because I had no power or choice and control once I start drinking. That's what I'm going to do. I didn't want to be this person, but this is all I knew. And I was a fugitive of justice for like 10 years. This run in particular lasted 5 years. But back when before I had gotten sober, back in 1993, I had picked up some charges down in Atlantic City. And I was a fugitive of justice on that. And then I had picked up some more charges, armed robbery stuff and aggravated assault, that I was a fugitive of justice on that. So like I had this whole secret life going. You know what I mean? Talk about unfinished business. You know the way unfinished amends will eat at us, man? I mean, this stuff ate at me I had to drink. There was no way I was not going to drink. And once I took a drink, there was no way I was going to be able to stop when it made sense to stop. And if you're there, I'm sucking you right into my jam with me. I drug her right into my jam. And that went on for about 5 years. And I knew I was going to die. I knew it. I was sitting in the house, looking around at the way I was living, and I said, God, please help me. I say, God, help me today. Because nobody else can. That's a wonderful prayer. God, please help me. Because no one else can. And I looked around and I knew I was going to die, and I said, God, please help me. And God showed up. The next day, knock on the door. I thought it was some guys from down the block wanted me to go do something. I pull up the shade, and there's a fugitive task force down there. It was a marshal service with the shields and the helmets and all that stuff in the bright yellow letters. I was like, oh my goodness. So I dropped the shade, but it was like too late. They saw me. They saw something. And boom, they come busting into the house and up the stairs, and I'm, yelling all this rough, tough stuff at them. Like, give me a break. They shackled and handcuffed me and took me out of that house. And on my way down the block, it dawned on me that God showed up. These men had just saved my life. And I had said that to them. I said, when they got me in the Jeep, finally, they were taking all their vests off and the helmets and stuff and high-fiving each other and all. And I'm like, you guys just saved my life. I want to thank you. And they looked at me like, who's this guy? That's not what you were saying a minute ago. But I knew that God showed up. The day before, I asked God to save me. Now, I wasn't too tickled about the way in which God showed up, right? But I don't get to pick. I don't get a vote. God does what needs to be done in my life. I don't get a vote today on how God shows up in my life. God, I will let you love me. That's another part of a prayer I have. I will let you love me. Because I can block that right out. Take a look at our inventories that we write. We can see all the ins and outs and the hows and whys of all that stuff. There are causes and conditions of how I slip and dodge God's love. He's dying to love us, all of us. But I can put a stop to that real quick. With that hole in the soul that we think we have, I thought I had a hole in my soul. I learned I don't have no hole in my soul. I'm so full of self that I feel empty. Sure feels like I'm empty, but I'm not empty. I'm just so full of self that it makes me sick, and I'm trying to fill up with the material world. Otherwise, it would be an acquisition trip we're on here, but it's about removal, not acquisition, in order to get closer to God. The removal of self. Anyway, I get taken off to CFCF, and after 6 or 9 months, I make bail and I get out, and I knew I was done. I absolutely knew I was done. But what did I do? I listened to the thinking mind, and I did what I always do. I got back to work. I ended up getting a girlfriend. I moved down at Rittenhouse Square with my brother, who was sober now. And we get a great apartment. I get the girl. I go get my legitimate job back. I figure I'm not doing that street stuff no more. I'm going to just be a legitimate guy. And I have talents. I'm a decorative plastering contractor. I restore beautiful plasterwork, ornament, mold making, conventional plaster. And I've known how to do this all my life. When I was a kid, the old timers in the neighborhood would be like, because I would have like a legitimate job, and then I would do what I did on the side, what I really enjoyed doing too. And the old timers would be like, Scott, what are you doing working for me? You're an artist. What are you, crazy? Why you know what I mean? And I'd get mad at them. Like, who you calling an artist? You know what I mean? Because artists are soft, right? Lord have mercy. It's wonderful. I don't have to be a palooka my whole life. But I would have settled for that. Today I get to teach my son the trade. I get to teach him. It's wonderful. It's beyond my wildest dreams. Because I'll tell you what, I had my son when I didn't have him personally, but I contributed. I was 21 years old. You know, when he was born, I was 22. My mother had just gotten sick. My son was 3 months old when my mother died. My father drank himself to death immediately afterwards. Her and I knew I wasn't going to be with this girl. I had all this stuff going on in my life at 22 years old. The closest people to me were gone. I know about loss. But I took it a step further. I robbed my son because I drank myself into oblivion. Because I couldn't handle the legitimate pains in life. Life's full of legitimate pain. I'm just too immature to handle it. And having chosen God does not remove the legitimate pains of life. Get straight on that. It's life on God's terms, and that's it. I can't do life on life's terms. I tried that. I have to live life on God's terms today. Everything I do needs to be done in God today or it has no value. That's the deal. And it's become painfully evident to me that that is the deal in my life. I was 3.5 years separated from alcohol. I hadn't experienced any recovery. Sobriety, sure. I mean, I was as sober as I was ever going to get. Unless you've had a drink in the past 3 days, you're as sober as you're ever going to get. But what about recovery? Sobriety does not mean recovery. Recovery will afford me permanent sobriety. But sobriety does not reciprocate. I don't get recovered by going to meetings, although go to meetings, please. I suggest we all work the 12 steps into our lives, right? And then we go to our meetings, our home groups, and whatever meetings, and carry that message to the alcoholic that still suffers. That's the suggestion that was given to me. And what happened to me was a shift where I no longer showed up to AA to be fed, but I show up to serve. And I never experienced another bad meeting. It's amazing. I'm 3.5 years sober. I can't stand myself. I got this wife. It was all her fault. You know what it's like in relationships. The whole self-seeking thing. I'll be mean to you to try to get what I want. I'll be nice to you to try to get what I want. And if it's still not working, I'll give you the cold shoulder. Silent scoring treatment. And you say, what's wrong, Scott? Nothing. With the remote. Nothing. And in my mind, I'm thinking, man, if you were right for me, you would just know what was wrong with me. There wouldn't be anything wrong because you'd be doing something other than what you're doing now. But I would have the whole script, but I never give you a copy of it. Right? That's a relationship dynamic. Lord have mercy. So that's what I show up with to marriage. Needless to say, it wasn't working out too well. She slips a CD in the dash of the car, and it's this a friend of mine today. This guy from Brooklyn, man, and he's talking. He was speaking at Fellowship of the Spirit, 2003, Sunday morning speaker. That was when the tape was from, the CD. And I'm listening. I'm like, whoa, who's this guy? I start listening to some other stuff, some workshop stuff, some step stuff. First step, second step, third step. You know, I realized that there is no way around God, and we agnostics. There's no way around God. You can hate God, you can not believe in God, you can love God all day long. There's no way I can get around God the way that piece of literature is right now. If I even willing to believe, however inadequate was sufficient to make the approach. And to this day, I think the greatest minds and the greatest thoughts and the greatest beliefs anyone has ever had about God are still an insignificant reflection of the true power of God. I will never wrap my head around God. earth. Maybe someday when they pull the grass over my face, I'll get my rap down about God, but not today. So anyway, I go to New York to find this guy because I heard there was a Fellowship of the Spirit in New York going on. It was back in Staten Island. And I get there, and there's these two guys from out west. This guy, Mickey M. from Denver, and Gary B. was his sponsor from Indianapolis, and they're doing a workshop. And I'm listening to all this stuff, and at the end of the weekend, I was like, wow, this is unbelievable. And at the end of the weekend, my good old pal, the Thinking Mind, shows up. He says, hey, Scott, you really need a sponsor? I mean, how bad is it? Your wife's pretty hot, you got money in the bank, you got a house, you got 2 cats, a dog, you got the truck, you got a car. My son's back in my life at this point because, his mom's not calling the cops on me when I drive down the street. Paying that $23,000 in child support was the icebreaker for that healing, for that relationship to heal. Making my amends to her, and then being a father to my son. I mean, they would hire any attorney in the city of Philadelphia to keep my son away from me, her and her parents. Then when they were having some problems with him, they called me up right away. I'm the guy they called. Hey, what do you think about this? What do you think? Bang, I'd be showing up at his high school. What's up? What's going on? Come on, let's take a ride. We'll have a talk. He came and lived with me. You know what I mean? Now, he's lived with me. I've even had to put him out of my house when he wasn't wise. Smarten up, kid. You know what I mean? And I had to show him the door. But, since then he's been back, and he had to get straightened out, and he's one of us. He's sober over 3 years now. I love him, and he works for me. I have a wonderful relationship with him, and I love his mother. Not in love with her, that ship sailed a long time ago. But I have a love for her. I have a love for her family, and they have a love for me. I've had holiday dinners at their house. It's just amazing. And that stuff, I didn't even want that. That's beyond my wildest dreams to the 10th. Because I didn't even want to get that close. You know what I mean? But it's like, man. But like I said, I don't get a vote in how God shows up in my life. Really, if I truly and honestly give myself to Him, I give you my life for my life. Do I get to choose how God shows up, or what's God? Am I really down with God's plans for me in my life? I think I have a decent idea. What does God want me to do? Let's say with making a living. All right, well, He gave me some talents that I've been around the country, I remember doing one of these things down in Alabama, man, and this old guy, he's 86, man. His name was Wells. What the heck was his first name? I forget. Tom Wells, I think. He comes up to me afterwards. He's 86, 87 years old. He's like, man, I had never met another decorative plasterer in my travels, man. And I'm like, me neither, bro. There's just not a whole lot of people that do what I do. So maybe that's a pointer. And it comes really easy to me. I can, this is a wooden ceiling, but a lot of churches, especially Catholic churches that were built in the 19th century, they have beautiful plaster ceilings. And you may think it's carved wood, but it's plaster. And I would look up at these ceilings, and I know exactly how to make that. Yeah, I can make that. And I'm sitting in church, I'm thinking how to make it. How do I make that? Okay, this is how I would do it. And it just comes easy. So there's an indicator that maybe I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. But my mind will tell me, maybe I need to go do something else for the dollars. I had a client offer me a job to go manage construction in nuclear power plants and coal-fired power plants. Start me off at $50 an hour. He's going to start me at $100,000 a year and give me an apartment and a daily per diem and expense money and a vehicle and all that stuff. And I'm like, God showed up. Yes. Hallelujah. And I run it by my sponsor, who's a boot maker, right? He says, really, Scott? I said, what do you mean, man? My prayers have been answered. No more tilling the soil, man, and praying for rain. The harvest is here. And he's like, really? So you're going to take these he goes, how many decorative plasterers you know? And I'm I'm like, oh, great, here you go. He goes, remember, you're talking to a bootmaker, Scott. I said, all right. He said, how many decorative plasterers, you know? I said, a handful, you know what I mean? And do you think they're God-given talents? Well, yes, Mickey, I think they're God-given talents. He goes, okay, so you're gonna turn your back on these God-given talents to manage maintenance and construction crews on nuclear and coal-fired power plants? I said, well, I guess not, am I? So I had to call the guy back and say I respectfully declined, you know. And I started my own business, and I'm so happy I did. Oh my gosh, I can't even tell you. I get to work on some really neat stuff. And my son gets to work for me. But I'll tell you, when I went through this work, back to that Fellowship of the Spirit in New York, my mind was telling me all the things our minds tell us right before we make some of the biggest mistakes in our lives. And I said, God, please help me. Wonderful prayer. I got down on my knees and I said, God, please help me. What do I do? And I opened my eyes, that guy from Denver, Mickey, was standing there looking down at me, and he's the kindest, warmest, most gentle man I've ever met in my life. He was all the things I never wanted to be growing up, but he was perfect for me. Because I needed somebody who was a student to teach me how to be a student, and to teach me how to be a gentle man, to be a kind man, to be a loving man, to be a man. And he taught me all the things that my father and all those old-timers in my neighborhood were never able to teach me. But he said, Scott, are you willing to go to any length to win high victory over alcohol? And I said, yes. I lied. Because when any link starts showing up, I'm not too sure about this guy now. And I considered firing him a couple times over the years. I've been working with him for about 10 years now. Just like I've been fired. I suggested one guy go get a job and stop being bankrolled by his parents, like a halfway house big shot, with a little big book knowledge and all that. And it's like, come on, man. Fired me so fast. It's ridiculous. That's okay. How many guys have I had to resign? I said, I'm going to resign as your sponsor. What do you mean? Well, you're not showing up. You miss more appointments. I do appointments. He said, Scott, my sponsor, Mickey said, Scott, are you willing to call me at 5 o'clock every Friday? Now, it's Friday night, man, like I got it going on or something. Yes, I'll call you every Friday night at 5 o'clock, and we do an hour, He'll give me assignments out of the big book, and we work the steps that way. In about 6 weeks, I went through the steps with him. And it was time to go out there and make amends. And I think more of us get loaded behind unfinished amends than anything else in Alcoholics Anonymous. I truly believe that. Because that unfinished business we have out there is swirling around. It's like a pendulum. And it comes swirling around. And what do I got to obsess about in order to keep it out of my consciousness? Or maybe it reaches the consciousness. I don't know, but I had so much unfinished business when I got here. Stuff I never thought I'd make right, I've been able to make it right. Financial stuff, it's not my money anyway. It's God's money. If I show up to the plate and I'm willing, it'll happen. I was an armed robber. I had a lot of crazy amends to make, Stuff I couldn't just run in there, put my spiritual cape on and run in and start making amends. I had a wife that would suffer if I was arrested. My son would suffer if I was arrested. I had to get permission from some people. Some amends I couldn't make because I'd implicate other people. And if I asked them, hey, are you okay if I go make... No way, man. No way. And okay, I can't do that then. But some of them I was able to. And I remember I made amends to a jeweler I had robbed. And I knew what I had taken. I remembered. And I showed up to this jewelry store, and the guy was in there doing business with a couple of women. And he looks and says, can I help you? And I thought, well, he doesn't remember me. I could have said, he doesn't remember me. I don't have to do this. But I stayed. God was moving me that day. I said, yeah, I hope you can help me, but it's very private. I'd like to wait. And the two women did their business and left again. He says, how can I help you? I thought about throwing the money on the counter and leaving, but that wasn't going to work either. So I made my approach. And when it comes to amends, I write them down. I didn't bring it with me written down like I'm reading from a script, but I get really clear on the language and what it is I'm going to say to you, because I believe it's very important. Timing and language, and not being attached to the outcome. Most important, maybe of all, not being attached to the outcome. Because it would be really noble of me to stand here and say, amends is where we get, what was it? Oh, amends is for them, not for us. We're, for healing and stuff. It sounds like a very noble thing to say, but the truth is, I need to get free of this whether they do or not. Now, I've had 99% of the amends that I've made, the people on the receiving end of the amends, just like they were on the receiving end of me and my nonsense, they were able to heal as a result of those amends. But that's not always going to be the case. Okay? But if I don't go out and make every effort possible to set this stuff straight and make it right with the universe, I'm never going to be able to stay sober and enjoy my life and really be of help to the next alcoholic. Which is why we're really doing this stuff, to be closer to God. So I make my approach and I let him know that I had harmed you by robbing you. And I robbed you of dignity, I robbed you of respect, and I robbed you of your money. And you didn't deserve to be treated that way. I don't treat people that way today. Today I live on a different basis. And part of the way I live today is to come and make an attempt to clean up the wreckage that I've caused you and try to set this right with you. And what can I do to make this right? And is there anything that I've left out? Is there anything you need to say to me? And he looked at me and he goes, wow. He goes, I remember that day. Then he went on to tell me that the day I robbed him, he went home and told himself that I was there to repay him for a harm he had caused someone else in a previous life. Like he deserved what he got that day. It floored me. I couldn't believe it. And the tears were starting to run down my face. So he had been carrying that for around 9 years with him. And perhaps he got free of that. I believe he did, because then he and I came together in a way that it was an emotional experience for me as well as spiritual. He asked me if I prayed and meditated, and I said, yes, I do. He says, I have something for you. And he reaches under the counter, and at first I thought he was going to pull out a gun. I was like, oh no. Mickey! What he pulled out was a CD that he was selling for $25 a piece, a meditation CD. It was a Tibetan chanting meditation CD. Here, this guy was a Buddhist. He said, this is my gift to you. I'd like you to listen to this while you meditate. And the tears were like, pew, forgot about it. The last time this guy saw me, I was robbing him. Now he's giving me a gift. And I took that and I honored his wish. For 1 year, I listened to that CD. I don't do guided meditation, but I honored his wish for a year. And I listened to that CD. And we talked about some spirituality, and I went to make financial restitution to him. He refused. I said, please, I'm on a life and death errand. He allowed me to make small financial restitution, but he allowed me to do some. And if he had said no, I'd have to go home with that. Can't push it, let him dictate the terms. And if he told me, get out of here, take your amends and shove it, I don't ever want to see you again, then I would honor that too. But that's not what happened. We healed. I healed, he healed. It was done. And I was able to leave there a free man. And those types of things happen over and over and over again in my life. There's just so much I want to say to you. There's not enough time to say it all. But I want to thank you guys for allowing me to be here, to share a little bit of my experience, strength, and hope with you. Peace.
Please just thank Scott one more time for coming up. customary to form a line and thank our speakers. They come here at their own cost and time and expense, and it's always a joy to have them here in Doylestown. Next week we have Brian G. coming out from Wilmington, Delaware. Again, hope to see you guys early. The food is out at 8 o'clock. Take advantage of that. Help us eat some of that before we have to get out of here. Don't forget there's a meeting after the meeting. Our sister group is a Big Book study. It meets on 7:30 p.m. on Thursdays at Salem UCC Church, 186 East Court Street. It's about a block and a half from here. Every Thursday at 7:30 p.m. Stop over. We kind of love that Big Book. We hang around, we read it, we try to apply it to ourselves, and we kind of have fun, you know, and we get free, and we get better, and we hang around with each other. Anyway, we got a nice way of closing. If you care to join us, thank you for coming out.